Hi, everyone. It is Carol C.C. Miller, your positivity trainer, peace activator, and global hugger coming to you today with another This is Life, beautiful and messy. And as you know, we are here to heighten celebrations and lessen sorrows through a positive focus. And if you've joined me before, you also know I am a huge hugger. So if you're in need of a hug, just type in comments where you're joining us from, and after the session is over, I will go in there and give you a virtual hug. And of course, any questions you have for me or for my guest today, please share them in comments as well. And I am so excited to have today's my guest. We're going to be talking about how to move through life's challenges. I think one of the things that is so important to me when I talk about having a positive focus is to remind people that being positive does not mean that I don't have to face challenges in my life through that, that I'm looking at a fantasy world, but it does mean that I feel what I need to feel in the moment, and I focus on what I want rather than focusing on what I don't want. So today, I've actually, Laura Duksta and we've known of each other for several years, and we'll get into that. I've never actually met her in person, though, so it's fun to be able to chat with her and learn her story. And thank you, Laura, for joining me today.
Thank you for having me, Carol.
So I want you to first start off talking about how I met you. And I joined, it was 2008 when I started. I think it had been around for a while before. An online website called Co-Creating Our Reality, CCOR. And it was a 100-day challenge on coming up with focusing on what you're wanting to create using the law of attraction, coming up with some exercises to do it, and then being in this massively supportive community, helping see that vision for you. And it was, I think I did a couple sessions worth of it, but it was such a great community, and you were one of the people who were involved in getting that kicked off and started. So.
Yeah, it was awesome. Co-Creating Our Reality, or people got to know it as CCOR. And we did come to Chicago. I have a feeling, did we not meet at the dinner, the CCOR meeting?
Yeah.
I mean, it was a long time ago. That was probably close to 2008, maybe even 2007. But I was reading a book. I'm a big, fan of self-development and human potential. And I was reading a book by Mark Victor Hansen called I think he had a co-writer on that as well, friends together, and you might not find them right away, and then brainstorm ideas and come up with something that you could take to the world and make $1 million, I guess was the idea. I'm not sure that part has happened, but it took me a while to gather friends, and we had a couple of different ideas, and then came up with the idea of, what if we used all of these tools that we know about? Visioning, journaling, using affirmations, and put them to the test. So set goals, and then took on a practice of doing them and recorded our results and did this. And it's really awesome. I read the book Big Magic. She shared about author Anne Patchett. Am I getting?
You're cutting out a little bit right now.
Okay. Don't know what I can do about it because it's showing that I have full screen.
Yeah. Okay. So if you just go back to talking, I heard you say Big Magic. So.
Okay. Well, I read Big Magic, and for those of you that read it, there's an awesome story in there where there's an exchange of energy. And what happened is I ran into Lilu in the lobby of Landmark Education, and we were both reviewing the course. And now I know what it was. It was an exchange of energy. It felt like I was going to levitate when we were in the room together. We were swirling like this. And if I had taken off the ground, it would not have surprised me. And I really believe, even though we began a community together, it ended up being almost 10,000 people globally, and Lilu is still running with it. She travels all over the world. That's her. You are, there in Chicago interviewing everybody from around the world from the comfort of your home. Lilu's passion is to travel the world and interview those spiritual teachers, and she's doing it. And it's just awesome what she's done. But I really feel like even though we were a part of the beginning journey of the community, myself, Sandy, Grayson, and Lilu, it was really her soul's purpose. And she's gone off and done really great things with that and the Juicy Living tour.
Yeah.
So
I love Lilu.
That's kind of how it all got.
Yeah, I haven't seen Lilu for a few years because now she's living in Paris, but her energy is definitely off the charts, as is her big heart. And it's always so funny when we were together because she's got to be like this 6 foot tall, statuesque, beautiful blonde, and I'm like 4'10". So it was like a comparison kind of thing. But she is definitely doing great work in the world, and I love seeing her still following her passion, as we both are. So I was curious, as far as when I was reading more about your background, if you'd like to share with your experiences and what has brought you from 11 to where you are right now, or before 11.
Yeah, actually, it's a little bit before 11, and it's funny because I'm so complete with this that sometimes I forget to share about it, and it's a really important part of my journey. I love when my friends make some comments, and they're like, "Oh my God, Laura, we don't even realize you have hair." I mean, don't have hair. But I have something called alopecia areata, but I will backtrack a little bit before then. When I was about 7 or 8 years old, I was in Sunday school. I was brought up in a very like white suburb.
Oh no, I believe Laura is totally frozen right now. So technology is always so fun.
Yeah, it could be the rain we're getting here in Nashville. It's a pretty deep day.
Well, and before you go on to talk about your story, I think that that's important as far as, this is life, the beautiful and the messy. Like, if we waited for everything to be perfect before we did anything, we would be still waiting probably. So I don't know technology other than enough to get myself into trouble, but we still wanted to have these conversations, and sometimes they get to be a little messy. Often they're very beautiful and with just a tiny bit of mess. That's kind of what I like to say. So go back to, you were in Sunday school, and that's kind of where we left off.
Okay, horribly, but we'll make it through. I was in Sunday school, and I learned that Jesus was teaching, or what I took into my heart, was that we're all brothers and sisters, and it didn't matter what religion, race, nationality, that was really Jesus's message, or, class, where you were from, that we're all brothers and sisters. And because of that, we're all deserving of love. That love should really be a given. And then you could like or dislike somebody's actions or what they stood for, what they did. But love was a given. And I remember thinking when I was like 7 or 8 years old, one day I'm going to travel the world, meet my brothers and sisters, and share the message of love. And it was just this odd, I don't really remember that being a vision or hearing a voice that time. And I have heard a very clear God voice a few times. But I knew that that's what I was meant to do. And now I've come to think, when you have a big vision, God or the universe or spirit provides you with what you're going to need to fulfill on that mission. And it's not always beautiful. Sometimes it's messy and challenging. I'm a big book. I'm afraid. When I was about, and it's so awesome. When I was in 4th grade, I gave up biting my nails for Lent. So as a Catholic, for 40 days, you give something up that, means something to you or that's going to be a challenge or hard. And it was really amazing. I used to bite my nails raw. And in the 4th grade, I decided to give up biting my nails, which is something kind of big for somebody to, make a commitment like that at that age and do it. And I did it. And I've had beautiful nails ever since, which is really kind of strange because a lot of people that have alopecia also have really crappy nails. But I always said they were kind of a gift from God. And I was actually in Chicago at Book Expo, and there was a woman who chased me. We just kept bumping into each other, like at least 10,000 people there, and we kept seeing each other. She's like, I just know that I'm meant to interview you. So we went to Orange, which you might be familiar with, and we sat down, and we just started talking. She worked for a yoga journal out in California, and she's the one who made this connection. And I feel with all my heart it was just the reason for us to get together. She said, so I have something called alopecia areata, and when I was 11 years old, I had long brown wavy hair that started falling out in patches. And probably started falling out around the time I was 10. There was like a nickel size or dime size patch for quite a while that I just did my best to ignore. Turns out that that's not really how the most effective way to deal with something. But that's what I did. And then it started falling out quickly and big patches. And I became this 11-year-old with a really god-awful comb over trying to hide all the patches. And it was horrible. But I didn't want to talk about it. My family didn't know how to talk about it. My mom tried to get us to go to therapy. Nothing worked. And finally I ended up with a wig, and I became really introverted and shy, with my shoulders hanging like that and these terrible wigs because they really didn't make wigs for children, or we didn't have access to them. So I have this really small head even now. So as a child, even smaller, and the wigs just didn't fit or wouldn't stay on. And it was this woman who said, is there anything else that's affiliated with, with alopecia? And I said, there's a lot of other conditions, autoimmune conditions that sometimes people have. It is an autoimmune condition. I said, but sometimes I think it's the stress of losing your hair that causes those other conditions to spawn. I said, and people have really terrible nails. I said, your hair and your nails are the same thing. I said, and I mentioned that I heard a doctor say that they couldn't prove that it was stress triggered because it happens to children, which just is an asinine thing to say. And maybe he really didn't mean to say that because stress is relative, and stress can be you eat something that your body's allergic to. Some people swear it happens around the time when they get their teeth pulled. Some kids are deathly afraid of getting their teeth pulled or that work, and that stress to their body, it could happen. I said that, and she's the one that made the connection. She said, well, when did you start losing your hair? And I said, shortly after I stopped biting my nails. And it was my body's response to stress. It triggered the hair loss. And I believe that with all my heart. And not everybody will have the same journey as me with alopecia. But I absolutely believe with every bit of my being that I was given this gift so that I could learn to love myself and others and have a greater understanding for people because of that vision I had when I was a kid, that I was going to travel the world and be this ambassador of love. So I think life gives us what we need when we put the positive spin on it and see the bigger opportunity.
Exactly. And I think it's also like probably in those moments where you were losing clumps of hair, there wasn't positive thoughts. I mean, we still need to feel the loss or the sadness or the anger of whatever experience we're going through while reaching for that better feeling thought. And I really love what you said earlier. I've loved all of it, but what you said earlier about unconditional love, because I did not used to believe in unconditional love, as far as I thought, if you're in a relationship and if they cheated on you or treated you bad or whatever, then there's no love involved anymore. But I remember, it's been many years now. I don't remember which one of his books it was in, but it's one of my favorite quotes by Neil Donald Walsh. And he says, I love you, but if you continue this behavior, I'm leaving the room. I love you, but if you continue this behavior, I'm leaving the house. I love you, but if you continue this behavior, I'm leaving your life. And that just blew me away, that I can absolutely have unconditional love for everyone. I choose who I participate with based on behavior and treatment and that kind of thing. But I can still love somebody without being, and sometimes it requires you to not be involved with their life to be able to stay in that loving space.
Yep. That's beautiful. And I love that you mentioned, I know we've got some people on here, and I don't know if I know Kimberly, and I just want to say hello. I think that she's sharing that her son is going through alopecia, and I'm so happy to connect. I'm not seeing all the comments, outside of this, this we can talk more about that. We have a lot that we want to share about, but I want to share about Neale Donald Walsch. You brought him up, and he wrote one of my favorite, besides my books, his book, The Little Soul in the Sun. Have you ever read the children's book?
That is absolutely my favorite spiritual book of all. I mean, it's just so succinct.
And the whole world would just read that book, right?
Although I will say sometimes it kind of like, oh, but I don't want to know that that person is brought to me to teach me forgiveness or whatever. I want to be mad right now, but I think that book is amazing.
It's everyone, right? And with everything that's going on in the world right now, it's from our own individual relationships. So the gist of that book, for those of you that haven't read it, Neale Donald Walsch's The Little Soul in the Sun, it's a children's book written by that author who has conversations with God, like we all do. He says, pretty much in the end, I've sent you signals. We're all love, we're all light. Some of us have made ourselves to teach us each other lessons. And when they go into this world, the light that's going to make itself dark says, you have to promise me one thing. It tears me up I can't read the book without crying, but promise me one thing. You will not forget who I am. I may have made myself so dark that I myself will forget who I am. So you need to remember. Yeah. And that's hard with the things that go on in our world to sometimes do, but I know that that's the stand that you take. And it's a place that you have to choose to come from, really kind of on a moment-to-moment basis.
Absolutely. And I think it's also important, at least for me, to realize that love does not mean that there aren't consequences to people who have chosen to do dark, things and to hurt people. There are certainly consequences, but to perpetuate that fear-based behavior by hating them and all that kind of thing, it just doesn't seem to benefit anybody. I know when I have hate in my heart, which the work I do now, I can't think of the last time because I don't even care for that particular word. It just doesn't feel good to me. So the sooner that I can get into a space of forgiveness for myself, for the other person or whatever, and forgiveness doesn't mean that you have to, continue with a relationship either. Sometimes it's forgive and move on, but it really is about letting go of whatever is holding you back from living your best life.
Yeah, it certainly doesn't mean agree. It doesn't mean become friends with. I think, some of the things that are going on the planet, they're teaching us what works and what doesn't. And is this a cry out for help? And how do we bring more love and understanding? It's odd to me, but clearly a lot of the world still lives in this space. And I can't wrap my heart and my mind around that, the way that a good part of our tiny little speck of a world lives. Like, we're just this little blip in this gargantuan, and it's wild to me that we haven't figured out how to get along on this, on this little tiny marble.
Even that, Laura, I mean, there's absolutely things going on in this world that just breaks my heart. And recently in Manchester there's so many things, but honestly, even that is still a tiny fraction of what is going on in the world. Because if violence was our norm, then everything would be in chaos. And I think that we focus so much on them because, even though they seem like they're everyday occurrences anymore, it's still not where our normal center is. And people are being born today. People are going to, graduating high school today. People are getting married today. The vast majority of people in the world are doing their best to live their best life in kindness and have a roof over their head and food in their refrigerator and, feel connected to people. So even though the tragedies in the world do make me sad, I don't feel like our world is going to hell. I think that it's so easy to focus on what we don't want because it's right in front of us. But every time I think about those tragedies, I think about everybody who's getting on a school bus today and just going about their normal day lives, just being, one of the global citizens. So that's part of what I try to do with Positive Focus is to remind people, do what we can to support those people who are in deep need, but to remember there's an awful lot of loving and kind people out there in the world. And sometimes these tragedies bring out the love and kindness, like the communities come together to take care of each other. And so there is beauty even within the mess.
I think that's, I love that you shared all that. And because I don't, somebody yesterday was posting on Facebook, I don't have a TV for over a year now. It's heaven, I don't turn on the news. I don't watch it. That's how watch the same thing over and over again. It's very easy to stay informed of what you might think that you need to. But I love everything that you just shared. And while you were sharing it, I had a thought that I'd never had before. I love that. So what I thought is that, all of these things, because I really do believe that everything's like a macro of the micro, right? And so that these things that are happening, like we've got this body that's working nearly perfectly, most of us, right? Or else we just wouldn't be here. Our blood, our bones, our brain, our nerves. And that when something like that happens, it's like getting a cut. And you have this small cut here. That what happens, right, is that ideally all your white blood cells rush to it to help heal it and get out the toxins and it can be a really minor part, right? And then sometimes it's a bigger part. I never really kind of made that connection, and it's kind of neat.
And I want to add to that because I think that's such a great connection analogy of it. Because like when you get a paper cut or even a small cut or a small bruise that hurts, 99% of your body is functioning well. But by God, I am looking at that cut. I'm putting a Band-Aid on it, or I'm scratching it because now it itches. So I am giving that tiny little thing most of my attention, rather than loving up the rest of my body that isn't hurting and isn't causing me to itch or whatever. It's not wrong. It's so easy for us to focus on those kinds of things because they are right in front of us. But I just hope people realize that there is still a lot of goodness going on in the world right at this moment. I think it's because our norm is goodness that we take it for granted. And so when we see a tragic thing, it kind of takes us out of our normal space of, just going about life doing the best we can.
Yeah, I love that. I say something. I lost my thought there. But so we let's see. What should we move on to next? Maybe.
Well, yeah, let's go into, you were talking about let's get into how you started the books and things and about your next experiences, what got you. And you also write songs and.
Yeah, I moved to Nashville. So my life path has been very swirly, and I always say my decades are very succinct and very different. And I would have never, if you ever told me 10 years ago even that I was going to move myself to Nashville, to the country, I would have told you were crazy. I was a city girl, and Nashville is a very little city. It's a very big town is what it is. But, and I love living here. But prior to that.
I have to stop you for just a second on that, because I tell people all the time, I'm not a big believer of using the words always and never, because I have done never before. But I always tell people, I'm like, I love Chicago. I will leave for a couple months in the winter, but nothing's getting me out of this city. And now you're telling me that that's maybe not true. So,
Oh my God. Yeah. Oh, and people ask me because they know I am like, I'm like an ambassador of Nashville. I love Nashville. I want to do this whole thing called Keep Nashville Nice because like it's a sister city to Austin and they've got Keep Austin Weird. And we're just known. We just got voted the nicest city again. City. I say city. But it's growing so much. I told Carol we're lucky today. It's raining actually here because we don't have construction on both sides of my building. But I want to do a campaign, Keep Nashville Nice, and people are like, Nashville is just who you are. Are you going to stay here forever? And I'm like, I love it here, and I've actually never lived someplace where I want to have a home and residence and put some roots down. But I have no idea what my life will look like in 10 years and where that might take me. So we don't know. Because after I graduated from college at University of Maryland, I found myself, I was going to take 3 to 6 months off before going back to get my master's. I have a degree in sociology, was going to go back for a master's in social work, decided I'd move to South Beach, Miami for 3 to 6 months before going back to get my master's and ended up there for 6 years. My mother was practicing being social. But I wore a wig still. I was still pretty introverted. I was got involved in everything that South Beach has to offer, good and bad. And, or I guess those are judgments, but it was a swirly path that I was on for a good long while. And though that is where I began to get more comfortable with myself and the fact that I wore wigs and I could begin to talk about it. And I was actually at the opening of a nightclub for a friend. Oh, I don't want to skip over that. How do I do this quickly though? I decided that I was going to transfer from Boston College actually to University of Maryland. I spent 2 years at BC and then decided I was going to go to Maryland. And my best friend, who was really the first person who I felt like wanted to be my friend, she wasn't in my carpool. She wasn't, just my cousin and her friend who kind of took me under their wing when I had alopecia. And so she's like, well, I'm going to come with you. So we went down to Maryland. We left Boston at like 10 o'clock at night, went out dancing in New York because before I became a huge country music fan, I was really into dance music, like house music from Chicago. And we went down to New York, went out dancing, went down to DC, got her an apartment and a job in Adams Morgan, and an apartment in Georgetown on M Street. We were going to have the best of both worlds. I was going to live on campus. We went back to New York, went dancing, and then got back in the car to drive back to Boston. And pulling onto 95, I heard a voice. And it's the first time that I really remember hearing this voice. And it said, put your seatbelt on. And I said, I don't wear my seatbelt. This was before we all knew that we should be wearing our seatbelts. I said, I don't wear my seatbelt. It said, put your seatbelt on. I said, I don't wear my seatbelt. It said, put your seatbelt on. And its clarity overrode my argument that I was really having in my head with this voice. And so I put my seatbelt on. I was in the passenger seat. And I said, well, then I should tell Donna to put her seatbelt on too. And the voice said, no, if you get in an accident, it has to be her decision to have her seatbelt on or not. And it was just clear. And so I put my seatbelt on. She didn't. And we kind of looked at each other and laughed and acknowledged each other. But then I must have fallen asleep and she must have fallen asleep. And the car flipped over 2.5 times and I was upside down in my seatbelt wearing a t-shirt that said, will somebody rescue me?
Wow.
So, yep. She didn't make it. She transitioned. She became my angel that night. And it was 10 years later. So that's when I was getting ready to transfer to University of Maryland. Spent 6 years in South Beach and was at an opening of a nightclub. And it was my first time back in Connecticut since the accident and didn't really make the connection until I was there. The DJ, who I don't know, plays this song, and that I was right up against the DJ booth, and the DJ booth was on top, above me.
Yeah.
The DJ doesn't know me. He was also from South Beach, but we had just met that day. He plays this song and tears start pouring down my eyes in the middle of the club. I don't hear the words. After the night's over, I ask him, I'm like, hey, you played this song. He's like, oh, I know which one it is. Brings me up to the DJ booth, goes to put it on. I'm like, no, it's the beginning. He's like, no. Starts playing the song. I don't hear a word. Tears start pouring down my face. He sends, I'm dating myself. Well, I already did with the seatbelt thing. He sends me a cassette to South Beach. And I listen to the words finally. And it's a song called Shine, remixed by Paul Oakenfold by the Space Brothers. And it says, there's two awesome verses. But one of them says, there will be feelings you have never felt. There will be questions in your mind. Your sister left your side to help you grow, and now she watches while you shine. The soul of an angel touched from above. Your spirit is shining, surrounded by love.
Wow.
I know. How is there even a song like that except to let us know that we are connected, we are guided, life goes on. I love, and I'll share this part of the story. I was brought up, Roman Catholic, Christian, very much that. She claimed to be an atheist, but her energy and her soul and her spirit went on and showed itself to me and guided me over and over and over again. So awesome. And so it was that night that I found myself praying for my sister, the opening of this nightclub. So thank God for my 6 years of wandering in South Beach, or else I would have never gotten to this opening of a nightclub in Connecticut. My sister had her first child at like 22, 23. Now was married and pregnant with her second child, but her and her husband just had a crappy relationship. But they had one of those little soul in the sun relationships. Thank God for it. She called me while I was away to say they'd gotten into a big argument and he'd left. And she lived in Florida, and what I'd usually do is drop everything and go over there. But I couldn't that night because I wasn't there. So I found myself praying for my sister that night. And I was like, oh, this is kind of strange. I don't really pray like this anymore. Like, really, like, dear God, please watch over my sister. She could use your help. And something clearly, I said that, this is strange. I don't really pray like this. Something clearly answered me and said, your sister's fine. Pray for your nephew. And as I began praying for my nephew, the whole idea for my first book, I'll Love You More, came to me. And I got up and pulled out a piece of hotel stationery and started writing the idea down. And one of my friends woke up and said, what are you doing? I'm like, I'm writing a children's book. And I just knew I never aspired to be a children's author or a writer. I'd actually gotten a bad grade in penmanship from Mrs. Erickson, a P-. And I actually made that mean that I was a bad writer. Not that I write really messy, like geniuses do, when I wasn't paying attention. So that was another swirly story. She's the only teacher to this day, still 15 years that book has been in the world since we self-published it. She's the only teacher still to this day. 15 years.
Wow.
I know. And she is the only teacher still that found the book, recognized my last name, and called me up to Massachusetts and asked me to come and do a fundraiser for the library. And I was like, Mrs. Erickson, you gave me a P- in penmanship. She's like, I don't even remember having you, honey. She's like, I remembered having your sister. But it's amazing what we can make things mean. And then also, though, and I love, I'm a big fan of John D. Martini's, and he talks about how sometimes our voids drive our values. So I didn't feel loved as a kid, so my mother hates when I say that. But, with everything that I went through and things that were going on in my life, I didn't feel loved, so I make it my mission to make sure that children know they're loved. And then I didn't think I was a good writer, and turns out I worked really hard at being one, even though I couldn't own it for a good long while.
Well, and I wanted to. Oh, now I have it. Is you feeling loved as a kid and your mom not liking that? A lot of times, even as adults, people love us, but not in the way that we receive it, so we cannot feel that love. So, it's always so interesting on the different perceptions where people feel like, we loved you dearly, and then you're not feeling the love because of the situations you were going through.
Yeah. Yeah. My mom was a kindergarten teacher and she was amazing and still is and is awesome. My father was a raging alcoholic and gambler and now he's sober for like 20 something years, I think. You know, God bless him, and he's awesome, and he's still a big, you know, he's still very involved in our lives, and I love him with all my heart. And I thank him because I know that those situations and my sister's relationship, which is not, you know, still an easy one sometimes, is what spawned all of this. And I love, I'll share my book a little bit. We self-published my book. We actually ended up sending it to print on September 10th, we packed up. In August 2001, we decided we were going to self-publish. Never heard those two words together, really. And somebody was like, you need $10,000 and these 2 books, and, you know, here's the name of a printer. And I was like, you know, what part of unemployed bartender did you not hear? But I raised the money by the end of the day. My mom, God bless her, had really great credit and let us print the books on her credit cards and do things that, you know, through her credit. We packed up the original illustrations on September 10th in a FedEx package to send them to Hong Kong to be scanned. And I had a phone call with my coach at 9 a.m. on September 11th, and we were on the phone discussing the book and the next steps when her husband's telling her, you got to get off the phone. And my sister's telling me, I think you better get off the phone. And my coach said, there's nothing that's more important than this book right now. And not knowing what happened. But then when we got off the phone and standing in that day, you did not know what the world was going to look like in 3 weeks or 3 months. We had never experienced anything, in this country like that though, right? So to say that we were going to take $10,000 off my mother's credit cards, 2 bartenders and a kindergarten teacher calling themselves Hippie and the Bald Chick, you know, where are we going to go through with this? And I remember saying, well, now more than ever, the world will need our book and its message of love. And then I realized that the book was written for my nephew, but it was really written for all children, including myself, so that we would know that no matter what's going on in our life or in the world around us, how truly loved we are. And when we tune into that, and it's not always the way that we want to be loved or the way that we think it looks like that we should be loved, but the universe, God, spirit, source, whatever you want to call it, life force, energy, the big FP, it loves us wholeheartedly. We are so loved. We wouldn't be able to exist if we didn't have the beating force of love keeping us going. So we did put the book out and we sold 3,000 copies like in 3 months. We ended up selling 180,000 copies self-published, then got picked up by a publisher that's actually based out of the Chicago area, Naperville, and they're just celebrating their 10th year with children's books, and ours was one of the first books for them to pick up their line. And it's done in a flip format. I think I'm getting it in the camera shot now. So it starts from both sides and reads to the middle. So we say like love, it never ends. And it also represents that giving and receiving of love. And it was about 3 years maybe after I self-published it. I was driving on the highway in Massachusetts, listening to one of my favorite ministers, Michael Beckwith from Agape, who some people know from The Secret. And tears started pouring down my face. It's an occurrence that I have. I had to pull off the highway. I couldn't see. It was like it was raining in my car. And I pulled off the highway and onto the side of the road on the highway. And I heard that voice tell me, your book is really a message between creator or God and child, but the relationship that most people would understand and be able to relate to is mother and child. So it can be read both ways, and it's really meant for everyone. So now we've sold over 800,000 copies in the United States, and it's in 6 languages, and it's still just, I get these stories and emails and just that make me know that I'm on the right path.
I love it when I'm in a bookstore and I see it. I'm like, I know her.
It's everywhere. People are like, I see your book everywhere. I'm like, I know, it's a good thing. And it shows up in some strange places. This woman, I do a lot of art festivals, and this woman came up to me, and I was really busy at the table, but she came up and kind of put her hands on the book. And I said, oh, are you familiar with it? And she said, yeah. And she gathered herself together, and she said, I buried my child with it. He had been sick, and they, in the hospital, and this is one of the things that they could do. I actually just got another email like that, but this child was born 2 months premature, and every day for like 8 months in the hospital, the mother read the book to the child, and it got them through some hard times. And one of my mom's friends, she's got the most amazing stories of where my book shows up. This one not necessarily amazing, but she had gone to a funeral for a young man who had committed suicide, about 20 years old, I think. And she said there were like, 1,000 people. The place was packed, and she was one of the last people to go up to the casket. And in the casket with him was my book. I mean, yeah, it's a lot, and I feel very, very blessed to do what I do and to be bringing. I say, if this is what I spent the rest of my life doing, it would be good. But I also have a lot of other things that I'm doing too, including my new book. Right? So This is the one that came out. I'll hug you more. And,
well,
I'm all about you more than anybody knows the power of a good hug.
So how did that one come to fruition? What brought that idea?
Well, I've always been a big, big fan of hugs, and including some of my friends will tell you, like, Laura, you taught me how to hug, some ex-boyfriends and guy friends especially, but they're like, when you put your arms around someone, and this was well before I knew, some of the amazing things that we know about hugs, and that a long, tight hug can release endorphins, and it can help foster self-compassion and love and healthy self-esteem, they're saying, in kids. Sometimes words get in the way, right? And a hug is just a way that you can say, I love you. So I've always been a big fan of love. And when we were looking for what to do next in Laura's Love Library, hugs came up. And interestingly enough, though, I had sent, I know we always have lots of aspiring authors and people want to know the story. I sent several different manuscripts to my editor and was having a hard time getting his attention, I guess they weren't good enough, wasn't really getting much feedback, was a little bit annoyed at times, maybe a little bit more than a little bit annoyed. And finally, I submitted something, and he was like, oh, we've got something to go with. I'll get you some editorial notes. Well, to be honest, I didn't even know what one he was talking about necessarily. And those notes never came. And I was like, I wasn't thrilled with it. I hadn't figured out how to make it a flip book. And it was good, but it wasn't right. And I had tickets to go and see Wayne Dyer, who was one of the first people. I heard a voice one day say, I was on the couch watching TV, and I said, there must be something better to do with my life. And I don't know why I started flipping through the stations on the television, because that's not necessarily a get up and go. But I found Wayne Dyer doing his Wisdom of the Ages program on PBS. And I was like, oh my God, this is what I was talking about. And had no idea that a message like this and people like this existed in the world. And that was my connection to this. So he endorsed my book. I just reached out to him. So this was 2015 to change the endorsement so that it would encompass my books and my programs. And we email corresponded a few times, just had a lovely conversation back and forth. And I had tickets via Pam Grout and the E cubed and E squared phenomena. I had tickets to go and see him in September at a Hay House event in Orlando. And I drove from Nashville to Destin, Florida for a wedding that I was in. And then I took 12 hours one day to drive from Destin to Mount Dora, Florida, which is right near Orlando. Should have taken me about 8 hours, but I stopped at every little beach and bookstore and coffee shop and art gallery and got oysters and Apalachicola. I got to my friend's house and I was exhausted. It was like 11:30 at night. I was done. This was a Wednesday and the seminar started probably on Friday. And she's like, okay, good. And, I'm not feeling well either. I'm like, great, going to bed. 3 o'clock, 3:30 that morning. For some of you that know Wayne's story, that's around his time. All of a sudden, I get the way to write this book. And I'm like, are you kidding me, Spirit? I do not want to do this right now. I am tired. I don't feel good. It's 3 o'clock in the morning. No. And I was kind of laughing about it because it was so clearly pouring through me. And usually I would get up and find a piece of paper and a pen, but I couldn't. So I pulled out my phone and started typing the ideas down. And I knew there was going to be a flip book, and I felt like I'd written half of it, or Wayne had helped me to write half of it. Got up in the morning, sent my editor an email first thing. I said, I've got a new way of writing the book. If today is going to be the day that you send the editorial notes, don't. And but I had a really busy day. But by like about 10 o'clock, I was like, I'm going to send him something because I said that I was. So I sat down at the computer at about 10 o'clock, 10:30, and I typed what I had, which I felt like was half of it, and the other half just typed itself. I think we changed one word, and then it's still a process. That was September of 2015. We looked for the illustrator. We hired her in January. She actually got the illustrations done by March, which is surreal. But a publisher with a picture book at least likes to have the actual book to promote at the trade shows. So we had the book maybe by, I don't know, sometime in the fall, but we didn't release it until I went on tour in February. So it's a long process.
Absolutely. By the way, everyone, I have been watching your comments. So Carol has asked, she has a 5 and a 6-year-old and was wondering if your books are appropriate for that age.
Absolutely. They are children's picture books, but they're the perfect message, especially when they're starting to read or they're still, getting bedtime stories, which I never think you're too old for. Anyways, but they're become a real favorite at baby showers and toddler birthdays, and then a big favorite in preschool, kindergarten, and first grade classrooms. So they make great teacher gifts, and they're just perfect for bedtime and story time. Yep. Absolutely. And let me show that they come in. You'll find I Love You More in this little format a lot. This is Target sells this, and also Barnes and Nobles. And then both of them come in this padded board book. So they're the cardboard pages and a little bit smaller in size. But then I am fond of the larger copies, the hardcover with the jacket, and these are more appropriate for a 5 and 6-year-old. And part of that is because they've got all the illustrations. When you change the size and the format, you have to pull out some of the pages, so some of the phrases and some of the pictures. And while the message is still there and still stands, they ended up taking out one of my favorite pages from this book and one of the illustrator's favorite pages. So it's just what happens. Yeah. So.
I remember earlier you mentioning the fact that it's as if the universe gives you the experiences that you need to fulfill what your job is here. And since you brought up Wayne Dyer, he's one of the examples I always use. He would say it's as if God asked him when he was going to be born, what did he want to do? And he wanted to teach self-reliance. So he spent a good portion of his childhood in an orphanage because his father was an alcoholic and his mom could not take care of 3 young ones under the age of 5. So he learned self-reliance through that orphanage. And a lot of people would see that experience as being tragic and horrible and, all sorts of reasons to need therapy as an adult. And he probably experienced the sadness and the grief and all of that when he needed to. But he also learned that helped him on to fulfill his mission of helping people be their best selves when he had to learn how to do it himself at a young age. So, even in our tragedies, and I think it's interesting, and I really don't know the answer to this, like maybe there isn't an answer, but it does seem to be that we have to go through a major crisis to really wake up to living. I've had, you hear it all the time, people who have been diagnosed with cancer, and they wouldn't wish it on their enemy, yet they found it a gift because when you're about to lose something, you really learn to appreciate it. And so they live at a deeper level of love, knowing that it could be gone tomorrow rather than somebody who hasn't faced that kind of experience. And I mean, maybe that's just the way we're made up, but I mean,
I think it's part of it. I have a school program and a talk that I bring to women's groups and conferences and things too, called Empowering You to Shine. And I talk about our superpowers, enthusiasm and imagination, but also patience. And it's not as much fun. But then I also talk about, but patience is a superpower, where, it's a gift. I also talk about, we know, and we've heard this, but we know what it takes for a piece of mud, a pile of dirt, to turn into a fine piece of china. And we know what it takes, a piece of coal, to turn into a diamond. Like, it's kind of like life shows us this magic, but we haven't really embraced it as human beings, that what we have labeled. I love language, and everything has benefits and drawbacks, because we label things and then we start to think that that's the way it is, when there's things that happen to us that make us our shiniest, that turn us into fine china. And they're not usually a day at the beach.
Well, exactly. And there's I always tell people, because they say, do you have any regrets, or don't live with regret? And there are certainly experiences I've gone through in my life I would not prefer to repeat, but I certainly don't regret it, because it has brought me to who I am now. And so, you do learn to grow through those challenges. You can also choose to stay stuck in them too, and live in victimhood. Some people, that is their path for right now. And I remember when I first really got into law of attraction and positive thinking, I was wanting to grab everybody and tell everybody, this is the way to live. You got to be this way. And I quickly realized that wasn't the way to go about it. And so now it's more, I emulate what I want to see in the world. And when people want to work with me, I get people all the time saying, you need to coach my boyfriend, or you need to coach my boss, or whatever. I'm like, no, I'm happy to help people increase their positivity who want to. But if they're in a space that focusing on what isn't working is working for them, I'm not about to tell them any differently. Happy to help people who are wanting to experience a different way of living, though.
We're all on our own journeys.
Yes,
and so I love that that's what you do. Be who you want to be in the world. And for those are the people that resonate with that and that are meant to, will find it, and just to embrace those brothers and sisters, whatever path and journey they're on. Yeah.
And choose the ones who you're going to participate with at a closer level than others that you just send your love from afar. And it really, it's different for every one of us. And Carol just mentioned, and again, Carol and everyone, I'm going to go through and look at your comments and answer them. Hopefully I'll be able to get Laura over there, because I know that there was a couple specifically with alopecia that I won't have the answers to those. But Carol was saying that her son's friend, I believe, has a child going through divorce right now and having a lot of trouble. So I think your books are going to be really good, and just to love them up, because, all those experiences that we go through, I think people want to have that perfect childhood of mom and dad and, living in a suburb with the 2 dogs and all that stuff. But so few of us actually have that. There is no such thing as perfection. So it's finding the
perfect in its imperfectness. Yeah. That's one my mentor, John DeMartini, said, would you, sometimes we want things to be perfect and to look right and feel right and be all kind and nurturing for our children. And he said, you don't know what you might be keeping them from. Like their souls came here to learn the lessons that they came to learn. Don't try to keep that from them, and that's not easy for a parent. That's part of a parent's journey. I don't have children. I don't think you do. And these are like my children, and it's a lot easier to take care of
people you love, even if it's not your kids. If a really close friend or a family member is going through something that you feel you can make it easier for them, if they're not ready for that, then it's really, it is their journey. So it can be hard to be on the sidelines. But without contrast, I truly believe we would start taking the good things for granted if we didn't have a comparison. And so that's what, when I'm going through a big challenge, when I'm coaching people, I always ask this, I start the conversation with this: give me 3 things you appreciate today. And depending on where we are in our coaching cycle, it can be very easy for them to come up with, and sometimes it's very hard. But I always ask them, it's like, use those people who are giving you the biggest challenges. I ask, give me 3 things you appreciate about them. But if you can't come up with those 3 things, then realize that that one person, how many more other relationships you have in your life that are smooth and are fluid and are satisfying. So that one person is your example of what you don't want the majority of your time spent at. So again, it's, taking baby steps to go back to feeling better. And I would love it if you have like just, I want you to read the book for sure, but if you have just like a couple, 2 or 3 tips on how people can overcome whatever their challenge is with, like just some simple loving steps that they can do to move forward today.
Well, I think one of the funnest exercises, if that's a word, most fun exercises that I ever did personally. One of the exercises that really helped me, like I said, I have had this experience of having alopecia and no hair, but it's just so not who I am anymore. It doesn't run me, and it used to run me. And so did my experience of losing my friend in the car accident, or I don't like that word, right? I didn't lose my hair and I didn't lose my friend. They transitioned. But one of the funnest or most helpful exercises that I did, especially with my hair, was the story that I had made up about losing my hair was, I'm never going to have any friends. I'll never be able to do all the things that I wanted to do, and nobody's going to like me, and I'll never have a boyfriend. That wasn't the truth. That was a really sad story that I was telling myself. And what happened is my hair fell out. So then the exercise was make up other stories. And, I think the story that I liked the most was that I'm a being from another galaxy that needed to fit in first so that I could, get into the human race, so then I could, but then let myself go and become the love ambassador that I'm meant to be. Now, it's a crazy story that I made up, sci-fi, but that one's more empowering and fun. And then playing around with that, and it didn't happen like that, but playing around with, like, don't just come up with one. Come up with like 3 or 4 different ones, and realize what that helps you be able to do is disconnect the actually like what happened from what you're making it mean, and that there's incredible power in that because you're still making it up. And that's one of my favorite. It's one of the talks that I give. We make it all up anyways. Might as well make it up good. So figure out if the story that you're telling yourself is one that empowers you and your children and the people around you. And if it doesn't, change the channel or make up a new story. We're all meant to be creative. We are all designing and writing our own stories in our own life, and we're either aware of what we're doing or not. So that's a fun one. And then,
what I like about that one too is not only is it making up a new story, but it's not like lying about it. I mean, I think it's so impactful for me when people take whatever their pain is, and pain looks different for many people. Your experience, was losing your hair at a young age. And I mean, goodness, when we're that age, we want to be like everyone anyway, and making it a purpose. So it's not about pretending it didn't even happen, but to rise above what happened and to see the gem in what took place.
Yeah. Right. How am I going to use this challenge? And I mean, the sooner that we can start to see it, the better off we'll be. But that doesn't mean, I don't think that we're meant to go from A to B instantly. Right. I think part of, and I say that I handled this probably worse than.
Okay. I believe she's frozen again in a very, oh, no, she's back.
Okay. I went through so much, like self-loathing and depression and it's hard to believe that I was really, really shy and introverted and miserable. But I lived that for 19 years, not full 19 years, but I wore wigs for 19 years before I started getting this freedom. And, but I know that I experienced life the way that I did so that I could have compassion and empathy for others who did. There's so many kids now who handle their alopecia like rock stars. And that's awesome. I'm so much, I'm happy for them that they're having that experience. But I think that if I had had that experience myself, I wouldn't be who I am now. And so this is the right journey for me. So that's a question that you can ask yourself. Why am I experiencing this? Oh, this is great. If you're only seeing the drawbacks to something, it will keep you depressed. And if you're only seeing the positives and the benefits to something, it keeps you elated. So when you have a experience of elation or an experience of depression, balance it out. You will bring yourself into your heart, your center, where you'll be inspired and empowered versus stuck and benefits or drawbacks. Or depression or elation. Are we good? Are you still hearing me?
Yep, I hear you.
Okay, so I know we're at the top of the hour. Do we have time to read the book?
Yeah, I would love for you to read the book. It's about hugs. How can you not read the book?
So this one's all about hugs, and it's I'll hug you more. Now, I think what's going to be funny with the cameras, it might look a little bit backwards, but you'll get the idea. Oh. And written by myself and illustrated by Melissa E.I. Rise and shine. It's time to start our day with an I love you and a big hug to get you on your way. I'll hug you and tickle your toes and spin you in the air. I'll hug you as we read a book up on our comfy chair. I'll hug you when I buckle you up before we go for a ride. I'll hug you after we come in from playing with friends outside. I'll hug you and dry you off when you're done swimming like a fish. I'll hug you as we gaze at the shining stars and together make a wish. I'll hug you as we swing together in the old oak tree. I'll hug you on a stormy night and keep you safe with me. When our day is done and it's time to say goodnight, I'll wrap my arms around you and hug you real tight. I'll softly whisper, I love you, and hear you say, I love you more. And when the new day starts again, I won't just hug you one more time. Tomorrow, I'll hug you more. I'll hug you more and more and more. And that's where my book closes, and you flip it over, and now you begin it from the other side. And I love you more represents the giving and receiving of love. It does that as well. And this one represents the embrace of a hug, that you can't give one without receiving one. Rise and shine, it's time to start our day. With an I love you and a big hug, we're off and on our way. I'll hug you to say thank you for getting my breakfast ready. I'll hug you and snuggle with you and my favorite teddy. I'll hug you around your leg because that's as high as I can reach. I'll hug you after a yummy snack, maybe a giant peach. That's my favorite page, or one of my favorite pages that got taken out. I'll hug you when I get home from school and share about my day. I'll hug you after we sit and color on the floor and play. I'll hug you when I'm done with my bath and have my pajamas on. I'll hug you when it's time for bed with a stretch and a great big yawn. Now that our day is done and it's time to say goodnight, I tell you I love you more before you turn out my light. When the new day starts again, this I know for sure, I won't just hug you one more time. Tomorrow I'll hug you more. I'll hug you more and more and more.
I love it. I love it, love it, love it. And a perfect way to, I kind of wish it was that you just tucked me in, because it's like the perfect story. Thank you so much, Laura, for joining today. I'll put your website in comments so people can they get the book on Amazon? The book, your book's on Amazon?
On Amazon, at Target, at Barnes and Nobles. Actually, let me let you know. Barnes and Nobles right now has both of these padded board books on display on a little books for big libraries, and they're buy one, get one 50% off. And I think you can do that at barnesandnobles.com as well. Or all the different formats are available on Amazon. And if people want signed copies from me, they can go to my website, lauraduksta.com, and I write a personal message to your loved ones before I sign them out.
Oh, very nice. Well, again, thank you so much for sharing your story, because that's what I'm all about, is to help heighten celebrations and lessen sorrows by people focusing on what they want in life. And we all have these kinds of stories where I just want to make sure people know that just because I focus and train and teach positivity does not mean that I haven't had challenges in my life. So it's really about sharing the connection and reminding you that you matter. You matter to me, you matter to the world, and most importantly, you matter to you. So join me tomorrow, where I will have Rebecca Sagoda talking about an empowering child's program that she has, and it's called I Believe in Me, and it's all teaching kids about their power and through infinite possibilities. So thank you, Laura. I hope that we talk again soon. Keep shining bright. I love the story about that song. I'm going to have to go see if I can find that song now. So everyone, have a great day. I'll come out in comments here shortly. And big hugs to everybody. We'll talk soon. Bye-bye.
Carol.